Hello and welcome to the Owl Nest podcast. Joining me today, I'm Bread and Rice. And joining me today, just like every time I drink a carbonated beverage, is Hiccup.
Oh man, we're here after quite possibly the shortest week of Overwatch League in history, right? I mean,
Shortest, but possibly the best, considering the standings right now.
I think your definition of best needs some serious TLC. We had 9 matches, and of those 9, we had like 2 toilet bowls, like 4 3-0s. We only had 2 bangers, and that was it.
And London's in the top 3.
Does that make the week innately good, though?
Yeah. Yes. No. Yes.
It was an interesting week, but it was
an interesting week.
Short
some
and sweet.
Interesting changes. Short, sweet. We did get some meta changes, slightly. One thing I noticed, we saw a lot more Tracer than we saw before.
We saw
Overwatch,
a large amount of Tracer comparatively.
Yeah. The OWL website actually had an article talking about it. It's pretty interesting. Some of the meta changes you saw. Tracer went up from 3.5%.
I mean, a 5% jump in playtime,
and Genji
just
died.
tanked. He tanked.
Yeah.
An 8% drop. So I mean, it was a lot more Tracer than Genji, and Echo kind of also dipped a little bit. Although there were some teams that did still pick her up, like the Outlaws and such. But it was Tracer over Genji, which I enjoyed. I think Tracer has a lot more pop-off potential than Genji does, but Genji's blades are sick. Not gonna take that away from everything that's going on. But we also saw a lot more of like that Zarya comp being played.
Yeah.
The
Zarya Reaper.
Zarya Reaper kind of rush, like what I've seen people call it like ghost dive, which I guess because Reaper like shadow steps in, so like Reaper's like playing the role of the main tank in terms of engaging. I think it's just a rush comp. I don't consider it a dive comp in any sense of the word.
Yeah, especially if you look on what maps they tend to bring it out on. It's all the maps that you would normally see Brawl.
Yeah. It's
a lot
very,
of King's Row, a lot of Eichenwald.
Very map dependent, and it's also like harder to coordinate because even though Reaper like shadow steps in versus when you're playing a Doomfist or Winston comp, it's like the Zarya comp, and in order to engage, you just walk at the enemy team. There's no like death jumping in from above with like tracers and echoes and Doomfist just going. They just like walk forward. You just see them coming. So it's like you can't. There's no disengage either. So it's like you're in. You have to win the fight. But we had some teams. I mean, Dallas was playing it great, but then Paris tried pulling it out, and that was not very inspirational.
Do you think pick rates on that comp are going to go up as time goes on?
I think it depends. Because what we saw this week was like teams had mixed success with it, but I think that largely just has to do with like the caliber of the team and the people playing. Because like obviously, Vestola is not the same as Hanbin. I wouldn't put those two in the same category. So it's like if your Zarya player isn't like cracked, then you probably just better just staying with the Winston comp, because the Winston comps are just safe.
Yeah.
It's a safe pick, and like the Doom comps are like very risky. It's like very explosive and aggressive, but if you don't get your if you don't win the fight immediately, you're kind of locked into the engage, and it's really easy to be punished. So the Winston comps with like the Tracer, I think, are the safest way to go, and most teams were still playing the Winston comps. It was just we had a little bit more of the other stuff when we got into maps like Eichenwald, Kings Row, and Midtown. We didn't really see a whole lot of Circuit Royal this week.
No.
So we didn't get to see any of the funky Sigma comps like we saw before, but we saw it in a handful of matches. But overall, that Circuit Royal is just a different map. It's like Junkertown in Season 1, where everyone was just playing Bastion. Circuit Royal is just the kind of wonky map where everyone does what they want.
Yeah. One thing about the Zarya pick, I can't remember who said it, but I heard from someone that Zarya, one reason we're seeing it more is it got out that Apac's playing a lot of Zarya.
Oh yeah, that was Hanbin.
So I think Yeah. So I think it'll be interesting to see this week with the APAC matches coming in. Uh, it'll be interesting to
Yeah.
see how much Zarya we see and if they play it differently at all.
I have no idea what APAC
Yeah,
will play
it'll be
with it,
interesting.
but it was a good week. We had some terrible eye bleach matches, but we had some okay ones. Some teams looking good, teams looking okay. But
Yeah, but it is what it is. One thing that I think's interesting as I'm looking at these pick rate charts, uh, Ana has the highest pick rate in the game.
that doesn't
So
surprise me. I mean, honors are kind of cracked.
yeah, they are, and it's good to see. I enjoy watching the high level Ana.
Don't we all?
Oh yeah.
Sleeping
Um.
everyone.
So, back to the important stuff, though. Uh,
Important stuff.
the
Do tell.
important stuff. London Spitfire rank 3 in the league, and they're one
I
map difference away from rank 2.
Oh, London
Just
Spitfire.
ignore the fact that it's a 5-way tie for third place.
London Spitfire. They look. I I mean, they've just decided that they don't want to play. They don't want to play by the rules. Although to be fair, they did play dive on Route 66 and a little bit else, and Shax kind of pounded on the tracer. But I mean, it was against Boston, so let's be fair.
Yeah. So
Just because they look good on dive against Boston does not mean they're going to look good against literally anyone else. But I think this Rhine comp that they're running out with Hadi is just they that's how they win. But I highly doubt they're going to be able to beat any of the better like actual good teams with it. But they'll be able to beat those lower bits of the rankings.
the real question with it, though, is are they going to be able to be top 8 at the end of this
No,
tournament cycle?
there's no way. So
There is a way.
They're 2-4 right now, and their last 3 games for the tournament cycle are Outlaws, Reign, and Gladiators. There's no way, in any universe in which they beat one of those 3 teams.
There is a world where they beat Atlanta.
No, there's not. Because the Doomfist comps are just better against Reinhardt, and they don't look good on dive. Generally, outside of playing Boston. Because when they played Shock, they just got slapped around. This team they've peaked. This team has peaked already at 2-1 against 2 of the worst teams in the league.
But I think there is an argument to be made that they are better than any of the bottom teams in the league. Better than Boston, better than Paris, better than Vancouver.
Yes, I do think there is the argument to be made here. Yeah, in a certain universe, I think that their Rhine comp will just be better than any of those lower teams because the lower teams aren't super great. And I mean, New York didn't even look like they wanted to win that match against Titans at moments. So I think London definitely is like the gatekeepers of the lower bracket of the lower like tier currently, but it's like weird because they're not playing what the top teams are playing. So it's like to break into the top, or the middle, you have to beat a team that's not playing what anyone else is. So, I mean, I don't remember where I heard it from. I think it was Backbone that may have said it on an interview that like they've been blacklisted from scrims by some teams because nobody wants to scrim against them because it's not meaningful scrim practice. It's like season 2 Hunters, right? Nobody wanted to scrim against the Hunters because they were playing just some out of left field stuff that wasn't like helpful in scrims. So London is currently that way. But I mean, whatever. It's working. Somewhat.
And the thing is, with no one scrimming against them, no one gets practice against that play style, and they might be able to sneak in some more wins. Do they end up, making playoffs at the end of the year?
Well, I mean, looking 22, 25 weeks in the future, I mean, maybe. I don't really know. The problem is that if this is their best look and the meta shifts to things that rush and then everyone else ends up having to play Reinhardt Rush, I think Spitfire then just get Omega rolled even harder than they probably will.
Decent on dive.
But again, it was against Boston, who were kind of throwing with some of their player subs and everything. So I don't. London looks okay now, but they've had a super soft schedule, all things considered. Even though Hadi's out here playing like Bumper is probably just smiling, from afar. He's like, "Oh yes, my play style, my child." But there's no way this team does anything more against actual competition. Like they probably are gonna get slammed in the final weeks of the kickoff clash.
I mean, going into the season though, you had them placed at the bottom, so
Well,
I'm gonna hold on to my hopium.
You've got a lot of hopium to hold on to if you're hoping these guys are gonna make top 8. Oh no!
And when they do, you owe me.
Those final 3 matches are so losable for them. Like if they win any one of those, it is the biggest upset that we will have had so far.
And when they win, you're going to owe me one of these.
One of those blue
my
Cokes.
Delicious dark berry soda.
Blue soda, unbranded. Because we're not sponsored by anyone, so we don't want to show.
Unbranded. This could be your soda here. Sponsor. I'm just kidding.
Generic soda, sponsored. I hate it.
Anyway, yeah. So I think that's enough talking about London. I could talk about London all day, though. Which London, pick us up. You could be our official team.
I'm gonna need you to not do that. I do not back this. I don't back this move at all. I'm gonna need us to cease. Why don't we talk about an actually good team? Why don't we?
Okay, really good team. There's one that stands out because they're the only one that really does stand out right now. Let's talk about the Shock.
Man,
they are amazing. All those people going into the season that were like
unsure,
crashing on. There were a lot of people I saw on Reddit. Like a lot of people, anytime anyone had Shock in their top like 3 or 4 teams, everyone was like, "Oh, a Shock lover" and stuff like that, and was like bashing them.
I mean, to be fair, there was some merit to it because they didn't know how Kaluj would do on the main tanks. They didn't know how Violet was going to look on Lucio this season because last season he looked kind of tragic. But, I mean, Kaluj has been looking great on the main tank.
Oh, yeah.
Violet's been looking fantastic on the main support. Shock, because this week they finally had what theoretically was a true test in the Outlaws. And it was like not a terribly close match, but it was closer than a 3.
It was closer than the other ones.
It was closer. Well, I mean, it was. They also dropped a map to New York, but I feel like they were kind of memeing on against New York on Kings Row when they dropped it. So, but Shock looked great this week because they moved away from Genji from the proper Genji and instead just put him on Tracer, and he just kind of snacked on kids.
Yeah,
just a little bit. He was kind of farming on every hero he was playing, but it's like, and we saw a lot more Kilo this week because last week they were doing proper playing the 76, and then they would have Sam in playing Genji and Echo. But I think because they were deciding to go over to the Tracer, they just decided to keep Kilo in. Sam did come in for Kings Row, but I don't think that they were really I mean, it's not that they weren't trying that map, but it looked like they just kind of were messing about with the Sam Echo.
Yeah.
But it was mainly Kilo proper that they were running. So it's
they were looking really good.
They looked great. And so the question is like, was that Outlaws match actually a test for them? Like, because they still looked really good. And if that's what we consider the first test of the Shock, then I'd be worried for like literally anybody else in NA.
Yeah, in NA. And I think that's the important note. But I mean, at this point with 4-0, they're guaranteed a spot in the tournament. And so hopefully we'll be able to see them play against some of these Apac teams.
Do we think that there's a decent chance they go 6-0? I mean, they only have 2 games left, and it's against the Gladiators and the Titans. So realistically, they're going to be at least 5-1. And so they've got one match. I mean, they've got basically one match next week that if they don't go 6-0, it'll be because of that one. Unless Titans come out and just go Super Omega Saiyan, which that's.
And I think the Glad's San Francisco game is definitely going to be worth watching. Whether I honestly, I'm going to stick with San Francisco. I think they look really good right now. And every other team, like even the teams that look good right now, there's an asterisk next to their name of really good except this, or really good except these circumstances. San Francisco, they just look really good.
I don't
There's
know.
no buts.
I
There
yeah,
aren't any weaknesses.
I don't see any weaknesses with this team currently, because coming into the season we thought the weaknesses might be Collusion main tank or Violet's Lucio, but those have been solved, and
I think
it's scary.
the only potential issues they'll have is a drastic meta change, and if it's like a Rhine comp and Cluj can't play the Rhine or something like that, I could see
Yeah.
that being an issue.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
at this point in the season, I don't think there's anything that's going to be able to stop them in NA.
The shock train continues just plowing forward into kids, and
Yep.
there's nothing
So
that can be
take
done.
that, haters. I'm not just a Shock fan.
No, you're a Spitfire fan, apparently.
I'm a Spitfire fan.
No. Shock just looked great this week, but I mean that they played the team that supposedly was their challenge was the Houston Outlaws, who, I mean, how did you feel about the Outlaws this week?
Outlaws, interesting. Like, I feel like one thing about the Outlaws this week that really stood out to me was the Mayhem look really good, which isn't about the
That
Outlaws.
has nothing to do with the Outlaws.
But that was the thing. The whole time I was watching, I was like, Mayhem really impressing. Outlaws didn't do anything that blew my mind. I feel like Dante, him against Ana is pain to watch. Like, good Anas just destroy him,
Well, I mean, and Florida also decided to pull out the Checkmate Sombra a little bit on some of those push maps.
Yeah. And so I think the thing about the Outlaws right now is it seems like they've pretty much gotten figured out. Like, I feel like the top teams are going to just keep stomping on Houston unless they figure out something else to play.
Well, I don't know if stomping is the right word, because I mean they did go to 5 against Toronto. I think it's less that they'll get stomped on, and more that they won't be able to win clutch moments, because their clutch moments will be canceled out. Because what we've seen is that when Dante plays against really good Anas, he's just done. And especially now that Tracer is more in the meta currently, is what it looks like going forward. It's just super easy to punish him. And that's like one of the problems with the Doomfist comp versus playing a Winston, because if a Winston jumps in, he can put his bubble down and kind of dance in the bubble to avoid the sleep darts and the nades. But with Dante, he goes in and he can power block, but that doesn't stop sleep darts.
Yeah.
And his backside is still exposed and takes full damage. So he just goes in, and if he gets caught out, it's over. He's stuck. Yeah. They have to, all of their ability to win fights is based on whether or not Dante gets slept immediately. And if he does get slept immediately, he's done. It's just sleep, nade, death all over. Yeah. It's just done.
And there are moments when he pops off. He'll get a triple kill and it's like all him and he looks amazing. But then is that worth all the times that he feeds? And I don't think so.
Yeah, it's difficult to tell if the upside is worth the downside. I mean, it was enough to win against the Mayhem, but I mean, because they also tried doing like Piggy on Zarya on Route 66, which they lost that map, and I don't know if that was just a comp diff. They couldn't deal with Mayhem's high ground on second point, which I think is an inherent flaw with the Reaper Zarya comp, is that like if you're playing it on Eichenwald attack, trying to get that high ground on defend, I mean that second point high ground, you just can't. And that was the Outlaws just couldn't answer that, and then when they went to the Doomfist, it was just kind of a hit or a miss. And it was also like whether Pelican was getting picked off, because if it wasn't Dante getting picked off first, it was Pelican getting picked off first on the Echo. And I personally would rather see a lot more Pelican Tracer than Pelican Echo, because he just kind of looked like, whether or not he was out of position or not, he was still getting picked up pretty early.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It was kind of rough to watch. Like, I know you're a huge Outlaws fan, and you didn't watch the which game was it? It was the Mayhem match that you weren't able to watch live. And I was watching it and I was like, oh man, if Outlaws lose this, he's going to be so hard to talk to.
I would have. I mean, I was worried that they were just going to do the Outlaws things. I mean, because Florida just looks great. I mean, Florida is giving me 2020 Valiant vibes. Like another gun bust squad that just kind of was picked up a bunch of ragtags that currently performing way above what we all thought, and is living up to the Scrimbuck's hype that was coming in. So I don't know if it was Mayhem good, Outlaws just kind of not that great, or if Mayhem's just really good. My worry though is what you brought up is like Outlaws have been kind of figured out enough that they might not be able to beat the top teams, and I don't know what they do otherwise, because the fact that they're sticking so much to this Doomfist tells me that Piggy's Winston is not worth the downside. Is not worth. It doesn't have the upside that Dante's Doomfist does, and instead has more downside, which worries me moving forward. Because if Doomfist comps get slowly, pushed out more and more, what are the Outlaws going to do? I mean, they could play Piggy on the Zarya and do what Dallas does and try and lean heavily into that. But I mean, Piggy's not Hanbin, so it worries me moving forward. I mean, they tried to play some Piggy Reinhardt on Circuit Royal against the Shock that didn't. I mean, they were running like Bastion comps. I don't even know what was going on. So I think the Outlaws need to make some kind of adjustment, whether that's like put Pelican on Tracer, try and maybe run more Zarya comps, so that they can actually keep matches against top teams who will be able to dismantle Doomfist comps to keep them close. Otherwise, the Outlaws are going to be middle of the pack.
I feel like the Outlaws are in the exact opposite spot as the Shock, where the Outlaws kind of need a meta change of sorts to kind of keep their footing on, or just figure it out a little more, because they honestly they look worse and worse each week.
They really do.
I think, and the good thing about this week was they did beat Florida. They won that game.
Yeah, they did beat Florida, so they are 2-1.
So they're 2-1, and so they're in that they're tied for third place, and there's high chances, given who they are and stuff, that they make the tournament. And
they should make the tournament, because they're 2-1, and their final 3 games are against Paris, London, and Vancouver, I think. So like they've
So
they've got really easy games moving forward. So they'll be able to finish. They should be able to finish 4-2, which should be enough for top 8. But in that tournament, I don't know how far they're able to go.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to be able to do much, because as soon as they're put in a situation where they have to play top teams, I just don't know that they'll be able to compete, especially if they aren't getting the practice in these upcoming weeks leading up to the tournament.
It's more so just the weakness of the Doomfist comp, and we also saw that in the Justice match against the Reign. We saw another Doomfist team get exposed out the wazoo, except this one was a bit more dominant fashion. Unlike the Outlaws getting not completely staying in the Shock match, but not getting dumpstered and then beating Florida, Reign just came out and just died.
Yeah, it was painful to watch, especially because I had so much hope for the Reign squad going into.
I did too.
Going into all of this, and they just looked terrible. Yeah, it was definitely rough. I guess one of the big questions is this troublesome for the Reign long term? Maybe.
I don't know.
I'm not too sure on that,
because the biggest thing that this match was it was just a DPS diff, specifically between Decay and Nero. Decay was running circles around him, and then Happy was just popping off when he was able to play Widow. And I think that was the largest part of it, was Decay was able to just win the Tracer duel, and then he was free to just do whatever he wanted. And the difference between Atlanta and Outlaws when it comes to their Doomfist playstyle is Outlaws at least try and be super aggressive, and Dante just kind of gets punished. But the Reign play a very conservative and reserved style of Doomfist, where they don't push fast tempos. They kind of try and play reactively, and so they gave the Justice so much room to work with and just waited for Reign to do nothing, and then Decay just snacked on him. So Atlanta has more problems to deal with, I think, with their Doomfist comp than the Outlaws, because the Outlaws, their biggest problem is Dante just kind of feeds a little bit, but with the Reign, they just don't take space, and they give their opponent so much room to work with, which worked against other teams who didn't try and take advantage of the slow pace, but Justice just ran for it and just waited for them to make a mistake, and Decay just went in and farmed, and then Happy would just Happy had so much room on Dorado that he was hardly ever pressured.
Yeah, I think the biggest solution for the Atlanta Reign coming into the next couple of weeks is I don't know why they're trying to play these off meta picks when they have one of the best squads out there. Like they can run the Winston,
Yeah,
so they should.
that's the weird thing is that they're choosing to run the Doomfist when they literally have Gator on the bench. They have a main
Yeah,
tank player. So there's no reason, unless Gator just hasn't been looking good on the Winston, which I don't,
which is
which
possible,
is
but I
possible,
don't
but
think it's
I don't
likely.
think that Gator's Winston would be worse than Hawk playing this odd. I mean, they played like they tried to play Diva on Dorado, but then ended up just swapping back to Doomfist. Like I don't know what's going on in scrims and stuff to have them feel like they need to try and play Doomfist all the time when they have a
Yeah.
main tank player. They should use him.
Yeah. And so I think that's the bad news of this match. But the good news was the Justice looked dominant. And so for all those Justice fans,
Justice
well,
Stonks on a little bit
good
on the
news.
rise
They a little bit on the rise. Yeah,
because
I thought they were really good at reacting and playing well against the rain specifically.
I think that's typically I think that's how the Justice usually are, and it seems like kind of when they're given all the room that they want to do just kind of to do their own thing, then they're able. Decay and Happy are able to just kind of sit back and do their thing, but when they're pushed heavy and aggro, then they kind of just start to fall apart because then Decay doesn't have as much room, Happy doesn't have as much room, so I would imagine that they'll do great against lower teams who can't really push aggressive. But then if Justice played against Outlaws, for instance, I think the Outlaws would take that series because the Outlaws would just play super aggro, and
Yeah.
I don't know that the Justice would be able to handle it. But against Rain's extremely passive style, they just beat them. It was a
See,
DPS diff more than anything.
the rest of this tournament cycle, they're
They've got an
playing Paris,
extremely
they're playing
easy,
Boston, super easy.
but then they play
And then they're
Florida.
playing Florida, and Florida is going to be a fun one. I think that week in general, from what I've seen, that week's got some bangers coming up.
The final
And
week
I
of the
think,
tournament.
yeah, and I think that week's going to be pretty intense. It'll determine um, lot of the standings going into the tournament.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think so. Next couple of weeks for Washington shouldn't be too bad outside of the Florida game.
Atlanta's isn't too
And
difficult either, if I recall correctly. Like they will be able to make top 8. Like that's not a concern when I'm thinking about Atlanta because they're still 2-1. And I think
yeah,
that's a theme across all of like the middle and upper teams. It's like I'm not worried about them when they're playing anyone other than the people at their skill level. But I mean, you've got 5 teams sitting at the bottom of the league that are just free wins.
yeah,
So
that is definitely true.
hopefully Atlanta's able to get some footing on their get their feet on the ground a little bit and try and figure out what they want to play because I don't know that their Doomfist comp is going to work for too much longer. They tried to play some of the Zarya, they still got beat. I think that they just are a passive team, which is not
Yeah,
going to work against aggro teams or against teams whose DPS line is better.
yeah, and I just worry that they're going to be content being a middle of the pack team, like a higher middle of the pack team. And the way I see it is like, you know, if NA lets San Francisco just be dominant and every other team just keeps these issues and just floats by,
Mm-hmm.
as soon as we get into the tournament play, NA is going to look like garbage against Shanghai, against Seoul, against Chengdu.
Potentially, yeah. That is a concern. I mean, we still have a little bit until the regions clash, but I could see that being a valid concern. So hopefully teams like Atlanta and even like Houston try and get their act together a little bit. So
Yeah.
we'll have to see. But
Now, the next big thing we need to talk about is this dark berry soda is so freaking good. Oh my gosh, and only 160
I
calories.
I
It is
can't believe you're plugging generic brand soda.
so tasty. Do you know what else is tasty?
No. What?
The Dallas Fuel victory over the Glads. What a match. That was
The
an
one
awesome reverse sweep.
Man, the one certified banger. I mean, Outlaws Mayhem was a good match, but
Yeah, it was a good match.
was
But this one,
actually straight up one for the
It was
ages.
so good. I'm pretty sure that wasn't this the first reverse sweep of Overwatch 2?
Yeah, but I
I
mean,
should have
we're
looked
only in
going
week
into it.
2, so it's not like it's been a long time.
It's monumental.
Monumental, first time, first ever.
We have waited 2
2
weeks for
weeks.
this. It was halfway through the week, so like a week and a half.
Oh man,
Pretty intense. But yeah, Glad's Fuel. Glad's
looked way better. I
yeah,
felt way better about the Glads. I want I want to attribute it a little bit to the fact that this week they decided to run Ons Kevster the whole time and they didn't run Potapon at all. Who
yeah,
like nothing against Potty, but I feel like last week he was kind of the weakest link of the team. He was
yeah.
always getting caught out. So Ons Kevster looked great. Kevster continued to pound. I didn't feel like they see the problem was this match was close all 5 maps, but the problem is
Yeah.
is that at the beginning of the match, like Glads were able to finish out things and were able to take those 2 maps. But then as the series progressed, they just kind of threw in crunch time.
Yeah.
They would have like Funny Astro had some overall they would like use ults and like 4v5s or 4v6s to try and clutch fights and then would just get boomed and then Dallas would
Yeah.
then just walk over them. So they tried too hard to clutch fights, and I think that's largely what lost
And
them.
winning the fight or losing the fight, they lost the match. Yeah.
Yeah,
It was the
but it was still a really good match, and Fuel just got better and better as time went on. But
yeah,
I mean,
and that's the I think that's one of the big things is going into this week. We like last week we talked quite a bit about our worries for both of these teams going forward because they both had issues last week. I mean, week 1, week 2, both of them in this match, they both looked awesome, in their own separate ways. And it seems like both teams kind of figured out a lot of their problems.
yeah,
But yeah, I think the Glads losing fights when it mattered was a big part of their loss, which, it happens. And I think that's not something to be hugely worried about. Like,
yeah.
I feel like,
it's just minor things to clean up because I mean, I look at the Gladiators and they're a team that to me I think they could beat just about anybody else in the world outside of like
yeah,
Shanghai and San Francisco probably. But if they aren't able to clean up fights, then they're going to lose all those close games. So
yeah, that's
they
true.
have the ability to be close with most teams, but if they can't clean up some of their weird clutch moment timing problems that they had in this match towards the tail end, then I don't know that they won't be able to win those 5 map series. They'll just kind of
Yeah.
they'll crumble at the end like they did this time.
Yeah, I think the Fuel, one thing that stuck out to me, they killed it on the Zarya Reaper.
They
I
just
think
love it. They love those Zarya
Yeah.
Reaper comps.
and they look great on it. I think they're kind of going to be the NA standard for the Zarya Reaper.
It's just so weird that that's the comp that they picked because like you would think that they did run the Winston Genji on like Gibraltar and
Yeah.
stuff, but I would have just been like why because if I hadn't seen any of the matches and I was told that Winston Genji is like a viable strat, I'd be like, oh yeah, Dallas is running that 100% of the time. They're running it down mid, but then it's like no, actually they're mainly running Reaper Zarya. I'm like what?
Which I think if the rumors are true that they were the ones that kind of set the meta with the Genji and the
Maybe it was a bait. You think it was a
thing.
bait?
It might have been a bait.
You think they just baited all of NA into thinking Genji was
Those baiters, maybe. But more likely, I think they're just always looking for the next meta.
I mean,
And
they
I
were
think
ahead of the
fact
curve
that
last season. But
yeah,
with
so I
their
think that might just
limitations.
be what they're doing at this point. Is they aren't content just running what everyone else is running. They're looking towards the APAC tournament, and they're thinking, what can we do to beat APAC? And I
Yeah,
think
but I mean that's
at
not
this
till
point they think-
July.
I know, but the earlier you start preparing, like let's say if you're a coach for the Dallas Fuel, you're like, okay,
If I'm Rush,
yeah, if you're Rush, you're like, okay, NA is easy money. We guaranteed go to tournament with our schedule. We go to the tournament. How do we win the tournament?
NA is easy money.
And it's by playing Zarya Reaper.
I don't.
And so I think they're just looking ahead. I think right now their biggest concern isn't getting to the tournament; it's winning
No,
the
they're
tournament.
definitely in the tournament, and I think the only real competition that they'll have will be the Shock and how they can play against the Shock. Because if the finals of the kickoff clash isn't, if it's not Dallas Shock, then some other team had to have just come out with some monkey brain stuff and just boomed somebody. Because in my
Yeah.
mind, Fuel and Shock are the two favorites to win the kickoff clash, and Shock just kind of hard plays the Winston Tracer Soldier or Winston Genji stuff, and Fuel plays that occasionally, but the map pool that they've been having a lot, they just try and play the Zarya Reaper whenever they can. And Glads just didn't have an answer for it in a lot of cases because they tried to play the Doomfist against it and it didn't really work. And they just kind of didn't have an answer. And then once they went to Ilios and Hanbin diffed Reiner on Winston, they just kind of continued to fall. I don't know if you were Reiner, a main tank player, and Hanbin, an off tank player, comes out and diffs you on your hero. I don't know how would that make you feel?
Yeah, for sure. It's a little rough.
It's a little rough. It's just a little. But it was a good match, and it could have been a 3-0 either way with how close those matches were. It just kind of decided to flip its head at halftime. But I walked out of this match confident about both of these teams. Like, I don't feel bad about Glads.
No.
Like
and it wasn't like Glads. It wasn't like Glads were dominating and then it flipped and then Fuel were dominating.
No, it was just close.
Every single match was
because
super close.
The first push map was determined by like single-digit meters, and so was the last push map, which Dallas successfully pulled off. Probably one of the only like push comebacks that we'll see.
Oh yeah,
because usually it's like that. The other team caps first point, it's over. It's pack your bags. Yeah. But Dallas was like, no, we refuse to lose. We're winning this, and just pulled it back, which was nice
awesome
to see.
To watch. I've got to take a little side note here, a little rant.
Oh no, we're going on.
Why is Boston bad? Like, look at their roster. How are they messing this season up? Like, how are they going to map 5 against Vancouver and barely winning?
Oh.
How are they losing to everyone else? Like, what is going on with Boston?
So here's what I'll say about the Boston thing. Have you looked at how they're managing the thing though? Like when they were playing London, they got diffed in the Tracer duel because for some reason they decided they wanted Valentine to play the Tracer instead of, subbing in Striker to play Tracer. They're mismanaging, and then they had Punk in, and they're having Punk play Winston when they literally have 2 main tanks on their roster. Boston's just not handling their roster well. But I mean, if you're wanting to look at a team and look at their roster and going, why aren't they good? New York is suspect 1. How is a team with Yaki and they should be way better than what they've been doing?
So I guess this whole rant is just why New York, Boston. What is wrong with you? Is it just East Coast issues? Like, is there something in the water? Something in the ocean?
Because Washington is doing just fine.
Yeah, but is it Washington State or is it Washington D.C.? Oh, it's Washington D.C. Yeah, they're not on the coast.
Wait a minute.
They're inland a little bit.
Oh no!
Right? I'm from the West.
I don't know. This wasn't on the agenda.
On,
you just had an epiphany. You were like, wait a minute, these teams shouldn't be this bad.
I was just looking. This is how bad they are. I was just looking through Wikipedia, engaging in this wonderful discussion, and I hovered over Boston, and I was just like,
oh man,
come on,
the
guys.
Bread rant.
Like, what's going on over there? They busy having a tea party or something? Like, come on, man. Guys, step it up. Stop sucking. I'm not even a Boston fan, and I'm upset. Like,
that's hilarious. The boomage is real. Well, let's take a look at our power rankings. Why don't we?
Let's take a look at them.
So, Atlanta is not number 1. Clearly, is that a fact? A certified fact?
I think at this point, just set them aside. They're
okay, we'll get back to
down a little bit.
So Shock is 1, easy 1.
Yeah,
Dallas
Shock,
easy 2,
number 1.
I would say
Dallas easy 2.
I'd say
Glad's a close 3rd.
Okay, but now is when we get a little funky. So Outlaws are definitely not fourth. And when I'm looking at the team, like Atlanta's definitely not fourth. I would put. I want to put Washington fourth just for now. I would go like Washington, Toronto would be my order, and I feel like those two could be interchanged. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I could see that.
Because Washington, I mean, they 3-0'd Atlanta, who is theoretically in the same tier as Washington. But like,
Yeah.
I always have trouble trusting Washington because they always just come out and then just meme and lose. So it's like putting them at 4 is like, I don't know if they're actually worth 4. But at least for this week's performance, I think they're worthy of the 4 slot. Now, so whether or not they hold it, that's a different story. But now it's like, what? Because Toronto only played Paris this week, which is not a very inspiring team. So
No.
it's like, do we think that Outlaws should be higher than them, or do we? I mean, because Toronto beat Outlaws, so should Toronto be 5th, or or Outlaws still worthy of a 5th slot?
I think until Outlaws figure it out, they don't deserve anything in the top 5.
So 6th.
They go back.
And I would put Outlaws over Reign because I think Outlaws Doomfist strat is better than Reign. But it's like, the thing is that Reign beat Florida though. Like I really want to put Florida above Reign. Like I really want to put Reign below Mayhem, but Mayhem lost to the Reign. So
but Mayhem going forward is on the rise while Atlanta's on the decline.
So I mean,
like, I think
I want to. I think
losing to a Doomfist team week 1 is totally forgivable and doesn't affect. Like if they were to play against Atlanta next week and lose, then I would put Reign above.
So we're on the
we're all in on
Mayhem
the
stonks up. All right, Mayhem 7th, Atlanta's on that 8th spot, and now we just get to the dumpster fire.
Spitfire goes there, and they aren't dumpster fire; they're Spitfire.
Well,
and they have the potential to oust the Reign.
No, there's no way. There's no way. Because here's what we've seen.
Under Spitfire.
Here's what we've seen. Every time that Doom comps have played against Rhine comps, the Rhine comp loses. Because Doom is just strong against Rhine. That's why Florida lost to Reign.
But London has shown that they can bring out the Winston when needed. And so
against Boston?
They play against Atlanta. Which we've discussed, Boston has the players that they shouldn't be as low. Boston isn't like a guaranteed.
When does do Spitfire and Reign play in the kickoff clash?
No, I don't. Oh yeah, they do. They play. I think they're that last week as well.
Is it week 4?
I want to say it's week 4. Let me double check.
Because I mean, if those two play, I mean, taking London would be I probably would do it though. I just don't. Rhine comps are not better than the Doomfist comps.
Let's see. No, London's playing.
No, I didn't think they played Atlanta. They play Houston.
Yo, they do. They
do play
Atlanta. It doesn't say when it is in this. Let's see.
Well, what's the date?
It doesn't show on Liquipedia.
Why are you looking on Liquipedia?
Because it's easier than the Overwatch.
Well, while you're looking for this, so. We have London below Reign, and then New York.
Oh, I found it.
Okay, what do they play?
It's week 4.
Okay,
Saturday.
So they play next week.
1 p.m. And so it's
Well, I think the London's game against Outlaws this coming week. Is it this week? Or is it next week? No, it's. Do they play? When do Outlaws and Spitfire play? Week 3, week 4.
Let me look. It is week 3.
Okay, so then the Outlaw
Spitfire. They're playing Lads and Atlanta.
So like the Outlaw Spitfire match will give us a good idea of how Spitfire can play against Doom comps. And if they get bodied by the Outlaws, then I have no hope of them beating Reign. But if they somehow keep it close against
sorry, Outlaws is next week.
Oh, okay. So just kidding. So I don't think London. I think London are a solid 9th. And I don't think they're not. But then we go into the cellar. Now we go into the cellar of sadness. So New York, I think, is still the top of the cellar.
I mean, just because they have the most potential to break.
But now the question is Boston or Paris. Boston or Paris? I don't know.
It's like
Because
on one hand
Paris
you
looked
have
really tragic against Toronto, but Boston just didn't want to play against London.
the way I see it, on one hand you have the dumpster behind McDonald's, and on the other hand you have the dumpster behind Wendy's.
I
It's like
mean,
they both are garbage. And does it really matter? No, the dumpster picks up both of them.
well,
And the
so
garbage
here's
truck
so
picks up both.
if we treat it like we do the Atlanta, Florida, like Florida was on the up, they look more promising than Atlanta does. I think Boston's problems are easier to solve than Paris, because
Yeah.
Paris has some fundamental problems somewhere, whereas Boston, if they just put the right players in, I think could be a little better.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah, and Boston has the roster that they should be able to, like, they should, just like my rant, they shouldn't be down there, but
so
they are.
I think we could put Boston above Paris for
Yeah.
now, and then Titans. Oh, poor Titans. Oh my.
Poor Titans.
Their next 9 matches are like all against like top 6 teams.
They're like 2 tier breaks between Paris and the Titans.
Like there's a tier break between Paris and Titans, and then there's a tier break between London and Excel, and there's a tier break there. London is not in this. Is London in that mid tier? You think that London is in the same tier as Reign?
Yeah, I'm full sending on this. This is the reality of the world we live in.
Oh my
Spitfire
goodness.
are going to destroy Reign. It's going to be a 3-1.
I think there's also a tier break between Glads and Justice, though. I think the top 3 are like pretty far ahead of the other teams, but like 4th through 9th is a mess.
Yep.
Literally outside of Spitfire, any one of those teams could beat any of the other teams.
Yeah, including Spitfire.
No, there is no world in which Spitfire beats Outlaws or Defiant, all right? Maybe Reign. Like, and that's still sniffing some stuff, and that's just because Reign didn't look great this week. Like, you're pushing it, putting Spitfire in the same tier, and I'm just letting you have it. I'm just letting you.
It's gonna happen. The thing is as soon as you start doubting London will prove you wrong. And so I trusted you at the beginning when we were making tier lists. I let you talk.
Well, I didn't think London were going to be coming out on Reinhardt comps, okay? I didn't think they were being led by Bumper Reincarnated, okay?
See, and there's potentially a lot more that you don't know. Like, you don't know that they're actually the best Winston team.
Well, they aren't.
There.
I mean, they got bodied by Shock.
But
West region.
Well, yeah,
so now do we want to shift around the Apac power rankings because we haven't touched them since we made them, and there have been some slight changes.
What's the current standings? Just remind me. Go down the list because I might.
So we have Shanghai, Chengdu, Seoul, Fusion, Valiant, Spark, Charge.
Okay, so I think the only change I would make would be swapping Seoul and Chengdu, and I think part of that's just
I agree with you.
Given the recent getting rid of Faraway, but I think more importantly, just
it's more not having
a chaotic environment. Or yeah, that too.
That to me, Aprita no longer being with the Hunters, I think really puts the Hunters in an odd spot because now they're just running Leave Jinmu unless they've signed another DPS player. Which check Wikipedia real quick, and maybe they signed someone. They signed an off tank player, but I don't know how much he'll get played because I mean unless Apac is playing the Zarya comps like we've heard, then they might. But my worry is that they have Jinmu Leave, and Jinmu's a silly hero specialist, and outside of Genji, his hero pool. I mean, unless he can play Reaper. It's like he plays like Pharah, he plays Tracer, he doesn't play. I mean, he plays Pharah, he plays Genji, he doesn't play Tracer, he doesn't play hit scan. So it's like they're relying on Leave to do everything, and that's not going to be enough to beat Seoul. And even against Fusion, they might have some problems because MN3 and Zest.
And that's what I was going to say. I don't know that they're guaranteed top 3.
No, I think them and Fusion are going to be battling for that top 3 slot. And they do they? No, I don't think they play week 3. But then Valiant, Spark, Charge. I mean, Valiant are just no hills out here collecting DPS players like Infinity Stones. I think they have 5 DPS players because I think they picked up another one.
which I think I saw somewhere there was a Reddit article, and I didn't read all of it, but a lot of the teams over in APAC got interviewed by
Yeah, I didn't
media
read
site
through
over
it, but
there.
I saw that.
Oh, I read one little clip of it, and it was just them being asked about why they have so many
I mean,
DPS players,
it's like
and their
2020
explanation was just like, well, we want to have someone that can play anything depending on the meta.
It's like
and
2020
it's like,
shock.
as long as they don't Boston it could be awesome. And
I
yes,
trust
I
No
just
Hill.
turned-
I trust No Hill a lot. I mean, No Hill has such a good. I mean, did you see that tweet a couple weeks ago where he was like, he woke up at like 2:30 in the morning because he dreamed of like coaching inspiration and like woke up and like implemented it and then went back to sleep? Like that
That's
man
awesome.
is just insane. So I hope that Valiant do well just because No Hill he just is giving off like Chad vibes, and I want to see the
Yeah.
Dia redemption arc. I really do. I want to see Dia have some success in this league. So then our standings going through both of them: APAC, Dragons, Dynasty, Hunters, Fusion, Valiant, Spark, Charge. That looks good to me.
Yeah.
And then in NA we have Shock, Fuel, Glads, Tier Break, Justice, Defiant, Outlaws, Mayhem, Rain, Spitfire, Tier Break, Excel, Uprising, Eternal, Tier Break, Dumpster Fire. The
Yeah.
Vancouver Titans.
Tragic.
Tragic. Straight up tragic.
I wanted to be a Vancouver fan this year.
See, the problem is they don't have the breadsticks, so now there's like not even any reason to root for them now. You don't even get breadsticks if they win.
Yeah, tragic.
So
it's the worst.
It's not too great. But let's look to week 3, the return of Apac that
Apac is here.
That
it's
we've
about
hinted
time.
at. And it's this next week's schedule. Holy, we're doubling the number of matches in a week.
I think it's worth noting that this last week was the least amount of matches we will have this entire season.
Outside of some TUM playoff mess or something.
Yeah,
but probably not.
Yeah. But as far as we could tell, this last week was the slowest. And so if this episode's a little short, that's why.
I mean, but this
episode's
week,
a little long.
Week
we just
3,
have a talking problem.
We've got 18 matches in week 3 because
Apac
is literally stacking the box because teams like Charge and Valiant are playing 3 matches Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and then in week 4, teams like the Dragons are playing 4 matches in a week, Thursday through Sunday.
That's insane.
Like they've known this has been coming. Like they obviously they knew that this was the schedule moving forward. But even still, like 4 matches in back-to-back days. At that point, it's not even about prep. It's about can your mental hold up over if you're a team like the Valiant and you get just boomed in day 1 by the Charge. Whoa,
it's gonna be rough. Yeah. But yeah, I think week 3, one thing that I noticed as we were looking, the West, NA,
there's some tragic matches this week.
Yeah, it's even when we were talking about the teams, I don't know if all our listeners noticed, all of our many listeners, all thousands of you,
2 of them.
But pretty much all of the teams we talked about, it's like, yeah, the next couple of weeks are easy, or yeah, the next couple of weeks are just
hard
doomed.
because it's they're just playing each other. The top is playing the bottom.
So that's how next week's gonna be. There is one big exception that I noticed: Glads versus Shock. Okay.
The singular banger in NA.
The singular NA banger.
The singular serious match in NA.
The nice thing about there only being one really worthwhile match. I mean, it's Overwatch, of course. All of it's worthwhile and worth watching. But if you wake up and watch
only that match.
No, if you wake up really early, watch Apac.
Go to sleep. You can sleep.
Of
course.
Days. And so, yeah. So
of course. Why didn't I think of that?
Glads versus Shock.
I'm excited for this match.
Both of us are going to agree on who wins, but I think the important thing is, are the Glads going to be able to put up a fight against the Shock?
Yeah, even though we're both pretting Shock for this one, Glad's showing against Fuel gives me hope that they'll at least be able to take a map off of Shock, because
Yeah.
the only quote-unquote test that the Shock have had were the Outlaws, and the Outlaws are not playing like what's considered to be the main meta, whereas Glad's are. And
Yeah.
I think that there may be some, because like Reiner versus Kaluj, Reiner technically should have the upper hand because he's actually a main tank player. But I mean,
Yeah.
and then if you have Proper versus Kilo against Kevster and Ons, I take Ons in that matchup, but then I take, and in Proper Kevster's like kind of close, and then those back lines are both stacked. So this,
Yeah.
hopefully it goes 5, but I mean, if Shock wins it in 3-1, I wouldn't be terribly surprised. But like this match will really show us how good Shock is, because if
Yeah.
Shock comes out and just mops the floor with Glads, then we're just gonna be like, oh no, the rest of NA is
Yeah.
screwed.
And I think there are different levels of 3-1s. Like I think 3-1 is likely going to be the outcome of this match, but is it going to be like a 3-1 where it's
Like the New York
Gladiators-
match.
Yeah, like the New York match where it's like
They threw a map clearly.
Yeah, they took a map, but they got destroyed. And so is it going to be like that, or is it going to be like the Dallas Fuel Gladiators match where it's like you have several really close matches and
I think that
one
if
team
Glads
punches
take
out
a
the
map or
other.
two, it'll be because they beat Shock on non-Winston comps. Because Shock, when they played against New York, yeah, they may not have. Who knows what their like effort level was in that Kings Row match? But I mean, New York pulled out the Zarya comp, and Shock kind of was like, what do we? Wasn't really
Yeah.
sure what to do. And Glads could pull out the Zarya comps. I mean, they have the Doomfist comps, but I would not pull that out against Shock.
No,
So
I
if
wouldn't.
Glads win
You'll
this,
get-
they'll win it off the back of a map or two where they're playing a Zarya comp or something different. But I mean,
That
they
being
could.
said, I think Shock going into this next week, now that they've faced some of these comps and seen that they're coming out more, they're going to have a lot more practice against these
Yeah, but I
comps.
mean, this is the first time that Shock will be playing against a
That's
top
true.
caliber Winston, Soldier, Tracer, or Genji team. Because before this, the only teams they played that did that were Paris and London, but London didn't play that, so it was literally just Paris. And I don't think Paris is the best like measuring stick for how good Winston, Tracer, Genji teams can be. So I think that it's just such a good match. It's like literally the only quality NA match. But we also literally have like 9 APAC games. So I want to talk about Valiant Charge first, because
There are more games than there are teams in APAC.
I mean, I
crazy.
told Valiant's playing 3 games.
Wow.
So Valiant Charge, what are your thoughts on a Valiant Charge match? Who would you think would come out on top of that one?
I think Valiant should, but
Is that your
I don't
pred,
know,
or is
like-
that a?
let me give me a second.
Because I believe in Valiant. I believe in the No Hill, Beijing Bears, Valiant
Okay.
rebranded.
My official
Your official pred, what is it?
official pred. Charge win
Oh,
barely.
you
They
think it's a
luck out.
3-2?
They get tank diffed. It's going to be a tank diff between Rio and Krong over Sasson.
Yeah, I
and
mean
it's gonna be-
Sasson. Who knows how
Because
good
I think-
Sasson's even gonna be?
Yeah, I think anytime you see a team with a single tank player, it's kind of a
I mean,
little
it's
bit of a
working for Shock.
red flag. It is working for Shock. And the thing is like, I think Valiant have the potential to. I mean, I think Valiant are the better team, and I think long term they're going to be the better team.
Mhm.
But I think coming into the season, there might be a little bit of a figuring things out.
See,
Figuring out
the
when
thing
to play which
is
players.
this match is the second APAC match. It's the second Friday game, so this is the first game for both these teams.
Yeah.
I mean,
And so-
I'm taking Valiant. I think it'll be a 5 mapper though, and I think Valiant will just come in and show some fortitude as they begin their gauntlet weekend, because I mean they're playing Seoul on Saturday, which is that's not too great.
Yeah,
So
I
we're
think
divided.
that's
We're
the deal.
divided here, but we think it'll be a close. It'll close.
Yeah,
one.
I think it'll be close, but
yeah.
Guangzhou will.
So how about what I think
Dynasty
is the
Chengdu?
banger APAC match, probably hopefully, is Dynasty Chengdu on Sunday.
Yeah.
I don't see how Hunters win this, honestly. I'm going with Dynasty.
Yeah, I've got to agree with you. I think it'll be really interesting. The thing about Chengdu that's always fun to watch is they always find a way to play kind of like anti-meta comps.
Yeah,
And so it'll be interesting to see what they end up running. In APAC, if every team is running mostly the Zarya, it'll be interesting. Maybe they'll bring out
Ball.
the Winston or the ball.
The channel some 2019 level stuff. I think
But it'll be interesting.
I think they're just diffed in every category other than Leave.
Yeah,
Because
I'll
I
agree
mean,
with that.
Leave can play up to Profit Fits. Jinmu can't, and I'll take Smurf over Hunter's tank line any day. And then their back line is Creative and Vindime. So the back line may be a bit even, but with Monk and Nisha.
Yeah.
So I think the back line will be a little close, but I mean, outside of Leave, I think the rest of Hunters are just kind of diffed. I think Profit and Fitz and Smurf are just going to have their way. Because if there was a solo tank in this league that I would trust to play everything, it'd be Smurf. Because Super doesn't exist anymore. So I think it'll be a 3-1 probably. Yeah. I think Hunters will be able to take a cheese map.
3-1 or 3-0.
I think Hunters will be able to take a cheese map somewhere. Like if they go to Circuit Royal, then I think Hunters might be able to take something. But otherwise, Dynasty is going to win that at least minimum 4. There's no way this one goes to 5.
Yeah, I think Dynasty are a pretty solid second. I think that there's definitely a tier break between those two teams, and I think it's going to be pretty clear.
So then the final match that I want to predict, that I want to talk about is Spark Valiant.
Yeah.
So this is the final APAC game, and Valiant and Spark are both playing 3 games that weekend. So it's literally the final game for both of them. I think this game is really going to come down to who's got the stronger mental.
Yeah. Because I think this is going to be.
See, so I'm pretting Spark for this one. What are you thinking?
And I think I agree with you, and I think the reason why is probably the same for both of us. It's the fact that the Spark have 3 tanks.
I think the Spark have the better roster, but even though I'm not pretting Valiant, I will play devil's advocate to the Spark match. So Valiant are playing 3 matches that week, right? They're playing Soul and they're playing Charge. The Charge match could be a little close. They have some hope to win that one, but the Soul match is kind of a write-off. Spark are playing Seoul and Shanghai as their other 2 matches. So they're going to be coming in, most likely, into this final match of the weekend just doomed. They are probably coming in winning maybe 1 map if they're lucky against Dynasty. And so I could see a world in which Valiant come in with slightly higher hopes if they beat the Charge on Friday, and even if they do get bodied by Dynasty, at least they have won a match. Whereas Spark are probably 0-2, quite deep into the dirt coming into this match.
That being said, I feel like with the Sparks roster being as deep as it is, especially with their tank line, they'll be able to rotate enough in the early couple matches that they'll have bad mental, but at least they won't have as much fatigue.
They do want to be careful with the roster swaps, because that's what made them suck the last couple of years. Is they just decide to do roster roulette, playing roll the dice to see who plays.
Which the first couple matches doesn't matter, but if they
I hope they don't do that. I hope they don't do that against this season. But I think Spark Valiant could be a close game, because they're just going to be so tired. They're going to be so tired coming into that match, and Spark are just going to probably have gotten beaten down pretty hard over the last 2 days. So I hope that game doesn't just turn into a slugfest with both teams just kind of get us out of this weekend. It sucks. But at least they don't have to
take a long nap after that.
At least they don't have to play 4 matches next week like some other APAC teams.
Yeah, good luck to those guys.
So it'll be close, but it's just going to be so nice to see APAC back, even though we're just loaded on games, 18 matches. But then next week there's 20. These last 2 weeks, the kickoff clash there's just so many games. My brain's going to fry. I'm going to go into overload trying to remember what happened. Especially when teams are playing 3 matches. I'll be like, I don't even remember what happened between the 3 Valiant games. They're all the same to me. So I'm excited for week 3.
So, fun thing that I just realized, This soda has 2% your daily value of sodium.
It's not coming into focus.
Which
Oh, wait.
focus.
No, we do not
Focus.
get to see the sodium content of your
Nope.
off-brand soda.
But it's 2% your daily value of sodium.
Of
But
salt?
the play of the game has about
Play of the game?
10 times your
I think
daily
play is a
salt.
bit strong. This is
Yeah.
definitely
So this is much more of a trash talk of the week. And we have a couple
Oh my
examples.
goodness. Mayhem came out and just didn't they just were like, we don't care about the Titans. Hydron specifically, it was really just Hydron. The rest of the Mayhem didn't really like push buttons anymore, but I mean, Hydron was just he just wouldn't let up. King's Row, he just went off on him a little bit.
He was just ready for it to be over and felt bad. The big thing, he was just checking to make sure they were okay.
To which Masa responded, no.
Which, I mean, if you were on that roster,
Masa always just looks so sad.
Yeah, I know. Like, I mean, can you blame him?
Mayhem is Hydron is just like, go Widow, go Soldier. No, how about you win first? And then he's like, oh, GG, hashtag force of nature. Yeah, this Titans team, man. The Titans are just getting clowned on, though, because after when they were losing to Mayhem, I mean, an honorable mention for the memes of the week. I mean, Spitfire just, man, they dogpiled on the Titans with their tweet. And you guys placed us last in your power rankings.
They've got a point. That was directly
towards us, me specifically. Look, London, I'm sorry. I apologize. I'm okay with you being in 9th for now. I want you to beat Atlanta. I'm not going to pred you against Atlanta, probably. But I don't know. But poor Titans. This Titans team. Oh, man. Their next string of 9 games is just rough. The first time they play against a team they could win against is like August 14th or something when they play Eternal.
And I would not
pred them against Eternal.
Win. No. It's like
they're so bad.
It's so painful to watch, and there's little hope that they'll turn anything around.
I just because I mean they haven't added anybody. I mean, no, they added Mirror, which I don't understand because I thought Psycho was doing fine. But then again, it's like Paris dropped Naga and signed Wub. I mean, Wub looked okay, but I don't think a flex DPS swap is going to solve your problems.
Yeah, I think Paris must have some sort of... They're having other issues of some sort, I'm sure.
It's bad. The basement teams in NA are pretty bad, and it's tragic to see. And unfortunately, in week 3... there's a lot of tragic NA games.
And that's the thing. Like, it seems like the worst teams in Apac are like miles above the worst teams.
I would take charge against any one of those bottom NA teams any day.
Outside of Spitfire.
At Spitfire, we've determined are a low to mid-table team. We put a tier break between them and the basement. I
just wanted to make sure that your mental wasn't moving them down, because I know that you tend to.
I think they're definitely imposters. I think they're definitely imposters, but I'm open to being proven wrong. So that's it for the shortest week in Overwatch League regular season history. We're done now. Now we get to sleep.
Prove Hiccup wrong.
Now we get to go sleep for a couple days as we backload all of our sleep so that we can stay up and watch all of the APAC games live.
We hibernate.
We hibernate for one day. For Thursday, that's it.
Except I won't be able to sleep because of
the
wonderful amount of caffeine in this delicious berry soda. Get them today.
Not enough. Get me out of this. We'll see you guys all next week after we've run the gauntlet of 18
next
games.
Week. Have a groovy night.
We'll see ya.